Kennedy.
Okay.
So there was a question on this chart here, and let me ask here, let me bring up the pointer.
There is a
Is
difference.
it this
over the-
form
Yeah.
and this form?
Yes, there is a difference over the
So you have a little,
end.
so that's just an accent, so that
Uh-huh.
doesn't make a big difference, but it's that little iota subscript underneath.
That's what I couldn't see from my end. Okay. Thank you.
And actually, this is just one form of the first form of feminine form. Actually, it's even more confusing if you have the alpha form, because you have two forms that look exactly alike. But as I said, I'm not making you memorize those endings, so it shouldn't be too bad. All right, so let's move back to John 3:16. We were taking a look at this phrase. Igapisen, what did that mean? All right, loved, and it is third singular, so it means he loved. But we have to look for a subject, and so we have o theos. What does that mean? The God. Ton kosmon, the world. And what is the subject of this phrase? God. And what is the verb? Loved. And what is the object? The world. Very good. So as we were talking about these various forms we have here, we see underneath this, it says in, im, s. And we saw that the in stands for it being a noun. Then the next in is that it is nominative. And we're going to keep drilling this. If you see the word nominative, what does that mean? Subject. Very good. And then we also see that it is im in im. And so the im stands for masculine. Now, in this case, God is has masculine characteristics, but that's not the kind of masculine we're talking about here. This is that this word is masculine in its gender. It's just grammatically masculine. And then finally, the S stands for singular. So you do have this word in the plural whenever you're talking about false gods. That could be in the plural. Here, God is just in the singular, and it's talking about the God, the one true God of the Bible. Something that is interesting, I need to go back and check in the Greek translation of the Old Testament, but I think they would just translate it singular when you get to, if you translate Elohim, which seems to indicate that Elohim is not plural by it being plural so much as it's talking about one singular kind of exalted deity. So I'd have to look, but as we saw in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That would be Elohim in Hebrew, which is typically said, well, it's a plural. Well, but it's talking about a singular in that case. Let me just say this. I don't think, this is not Greek, this is Hebrew, but I don't think Elohim is talking about the Trinity. And here's why. Because the word Lord, Adonai, is sometimes is used, for instance, of Ahab, and it's put in the plural as kind of a majestic. So it's not that he's more than one person, a lord's. He's just an exalted Lord. I think this is an exalted God when we talk about Elohim. But here we see that whether Old Testament Genesis 1:1 or John 3:16, God is singular. So he is the God who loved. So God loved the world. Now let's take a quick look at the word kosmon. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that even though it's masculine, that does not refer to the masculine as in male. And you mentioned that Sunday, that there were some words we looked at that were the same. My question is, are there cases where the gender does specify the actual maleness or femaleness of the person?
Right. As I mentioned, the example I gave was brother, adelphos, and then sister, adelphi. You have the same root, but the ending changes to masculine or feminine depending on if you're talking about a brother or sister. So it is detailing sexual gender there, whether it is a male or is it a female. But here, of course, this word fits because God is masculine is I hate to, in the modern context, say it this way, but he identifies himself as a he in the Bible, which I think is a good argument against those who are saying that that it that God is just not connected with sexuality in that sense. Obviously, he doesn't have a physical form as God's spirit, but if they are saying we have to respect the pronouns that people choose, then we should respect the pronouns that God chooses as well. And he chooses masculine pronouns. And so he does identify in a masculine way. Whenever he uses illustrations of femininity, he is like a mother, but he is called a father, and similar things that he never takes on just purely feminine characteristics without using a comparative of some way. But here we have this as God, he loved, and then the world. So we're going to try to identify some things going on here. Notice that whatever interlinear you might be using, you would be able to click that 2889, that's your strong number, and that would tell you all the various range of meaning for that word cosmos. In fact, let's see. I hope I'm not going to mess you up here, Bryce. You don't have to put this on the on anything, but let me go to. Okay, good. All right, I want to go to John. I'm not as familiar with this, but I want to go to the. How do I get there? You guys are more familiar. You might be familiar. How do I get to the interlinear on Blue Letter Bible?
Hit tools,
Tools. There we go.
and then you got your items across the top here.
All right, thank you. So I want that. I want the forward inline. There we go. All right, so bringing this up on the chart here in a second. All right. Here we have God loved the God, the world. Notice that if we click 2889, it's going to bring up another page, which will then allow us to see the transliteration. This will be the traditional pronunciation, I'm sure.
Strong's G 2889, Cosmos.
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 So modern Greek would pronounce it kosmos, kosmos. But here you find the part of speech. It's a masculine noun. You can get the root if you're interested. Then I want to go down here. There's a lot of tools here. This one might give you a quick outline of all the different ways it can be used. Now, think of it this way. When we say world, do we have more than one meaning for the word world? Yeah, they do in Greek as well. So here's what I don't want you to do whenever we start learning how to do word studies. You go through, you look at the list and say, I like that one best. That is not the way to do a word study. That's not the way to determine the meaning in a specific context. But you can get an idea of how it can be used. And then you let the context determine. So this one will give you Strong's definition. I really don't like Strong's dictionary. And let me give you my reasoning behind that. He does not give you all the information you need, especially as you're looking at nouns and verbs. He'll just give you all the various ways that it is translated in the New Testament. I think if you're going to use something for free on here, Thayer is probably better because he's going to kind of split things apart based on usage and give you some examples. So Thayer might be slightly better. Notice all the information he's going to give you, that it could just be an arrangement, a constitution, could be adornment, as in 1 Peter 3:3, talking about the adorning. Look, it can also be the world, as in the universe. It can, keep going down, it could be, there we go, the circle of the earth He'll give you examples. The inhabitants of the world. And let me see here. I'm almost positive. Look, he'll even say, here is an example of inhabitants of the world. Now, obviously, Thayer is not inspired. He is making assumptions about specific passages, saying this is the usage in this passage. But I would suggest that a lot of those lexicons, they've been spending a lot more time in the Greek than we have, and usually they have a better idea of how this verse is being used. So at least consider it a helpful commentary before you just dismiss it altogether. It doesn't mean they're always right, but if you see the usage there, you should have some contextual reasons for saying he got it wrong before you just dismiss it. But he goes through all those usages. So notice this is the ungodly multitude, so on and so forth. This gives you a lot of resources to work through. Notice that you could, if you really want to study this out, you could spend a long time studying God loved the world, because you could figure out all the ways God is used, all the ways loved is used, all the way the world is used. And then you have to read the verse itself, the verse all around it, the entire section, and ideally know basic contents of the entire book before you make a hard and fast decision. That should help you realize just how thankful we should be to translators, because that's the work they go through in order to give us those little lines of Greek translation. Now, I would say that if we go back to that, we don't necessarily have to go through that entire process to get a good idea of what Jesus is saying here when he says God loved the world. You put that in its context, and reading just before that it says that the Son of Man will be lifted up, that's a sacrificial idea. And then God giving the world after it, what's that love? It's the love that he had that for the people of the world, that he would send his Son to die on their behalf. So I think just by reading the context, we automatically assume this is not talking about God loving the universe. This is God loving the people in this world. All right. Now let's talk a little bit. I should say that whatever you'd be on, that little E on Bible Hub lets you look up every occurrence. I think it's slightly more exhaustive when you use Blue Letter Bible. They give you every occurrence instead of, if it's a word that's used a whole lot of times, cutting you off at a certain number. All right, so now we're going to look here. In, what's that stand for? Noun. A, accusative. Very good. So now we'll bring that up here. So if we're looking at the case, we have nominative, ignore vocative for a moment, accusative, genitive, dative. They organize things a little bit differently on their chart, but it's an accusative, which means it is, as you already said, the direct object. So that little a gives you a lot of information, that it is the object of the sentence, the object of the verb. That verb is love, so that means God loved the world. And then it is also a masculine singular. Now, when you look up that word, let me go back to this and go back to the top. Notice that when you click that on the dictionary, it says kosmos, but we have kosmon. Now, I'm not making you memorize the endings, but in the dictionary, you're not going to find kosmon as the entry. You're going to find kosmos. Now, that's where it's helpful to have these little aids, because they do the work for you, where you don't have to work backwards and say, okay, how do I change an accusative ending back to a nominative ending so I can find it in the dictionary? You click it, it sends you directly to the nominative entry. And that's what's going to be, every noun in a dictionary is going to be the nominative form. That's how it's laid out. This is called the lexical form, because if you open up a lexicon, it's going to give you the nominative form. Sometimes it will give you the nominative and the genitive, but that's, again, if you're memorizing endings, it'll help you to know what form it takes. But again, using these free tools will cut out all that information that you have to have or have to work backwards in your own mind, and it'll do it for you. And I don't know about you, but I'm all about taking some shortcuts if it'll get me to study a little bit faster. Yes.
So if somebody says, this word is used this many times in the New Testament, they're talking about all forms of that.
Exactly.
word.
Exactly. And in fact, it even gets a little bit more interesting whenever you're talking about a verb. When someone says, this verb is used so many times in the New Testament, well, that's probably all of its forms in the indicative, in the subjunctive, in the imperative. It's also probably, it's going through all the various forms. And what's interesting and what is helpful with some of these lexicons, actually, Stephen and I were just talking about that this afternoon. He's doing a study on contentment. I think he's probably going to preach it this Sunday night. And he was looking at some of the verbs. And when you look at the lexicon, it will say, in the active, it means this. But when it moves to the passive, it means this. So it goes from being to be sufficient to being contented in the passive. And so that's where, again, you click on that word and you'll be able to tell from the information underneath, is this an active? Is this a middle? Is this a passive? And then the dictionary will tell you, here's what it means in the active. Here's what it means in the middle. Here's what it means in the passive. We'll go through all that when we get to verbs. But I'm saying that there is a lot of information at your disposal by having these dictionaries, these lexicons in front of you that can be helpful. All right, now, any questions about this so far? Just kind of how this works. Again, you have to kind of start to be on the lookout, and as either getting it in your mind memorized, or as Brad pointed out, Blue Letter Bible will let you hover over that and it'll tell you exactly what all those letters mean. But you have to get some of that terminology in your head. That nominative, you automatically think subject. Accusative, you automatically think direct object. You just have to start getting those things in your head if you're going to be working through a Greek text, even with an interlinear. All right, yes.
Can I back you up to something you were just saying?
Absolutely.
A certain word in the active means this, and passive it means that. I like example or analogs, I guess. But is there something like that you can think of in English where we do something like that? In other words, so that it makes it seem it makes it seem as if the Greeks are not crazy. You know, it says, who would do that? Oh, like we do. You know, that sort of thing. And if you can't think of one, no big deal. I was just, but you might have one.
Yeah. Trying to think of an example in English. Well, we don't even really have a middle voice, so that doesn't work. So, yeah.
That's falsetto.
So
the best I could come up with was something like, you know, I get, which means I'm receiving it, or maybe even going and retrieving it, versus if I say I've got to do something, it's more like need. I think it's something of an idiom there, really, is what's going on there, but that doesn't necessarily come with it.
Yeah, I can't think of anything directly that is like that in English. We usually just change words to give that different shade of meaning instead of keeping the same root. When we talk about active, middle, and passive, it's either love. So he loves. In the middle is kind of for himself, for his own benefit. But then he is loved. That's the passive. So notice we kind of use some helping words to go from active, he loves, to we don't really even have a middle, but passive, he is loved. We use that helping word is to show that the he, though he is the subject, is the object of the verb in a sense. He is being loved by someone else. But in Greek, they can kind of play around with the root, where if you have an active meaning here, when it goes to the passive, it can kind of take on a different nuance, which if someone can come up with an example over the next couple days, let me know. I can't really think of an example in English. That's just one of the differences, I think, between the languages. So I want to show an example of the word God in all of its different cases so that you can kind of see how these things are working out. And these are all Bible phrases. So we're learning some Bible phrases here. Nominative, we already saw them. God loved the world. God is the subject. Now, if we talk about a genitive, what are we talking about? Possession. Here, outos estin oios tou theou. Theou is the word for God, but it's in the genitive. Notice it changed just a little bit in its ending. But this is the Son of the God. Of the God. Here's what I want you to start thinking in your mind. If you see a genitive, put an of before it. So instead of just this is the Son, the God, this is the Son of the God. Genitive, put an of. Now, it's not only possession, but in this case, it seems to show some kind of possession or relationship that this is the Son. Which Son? This is the Son who belongs to God, or the Son who comes from God kind of idea. All right, so possession. Dative. When you see dative, what should you think? Indirect object. So here, dos is the word give in the imperative. Give, doxan, glory, to theo. Notice we have that root, the. We've changed the ending just a little bit, but it's to God. Not just give glory the God, give glory to the God. So if genitive is of, dative is to or for. So that's how we would use it in English as well. Instead of I hit Bill the ball, it's I hit the ball to Bill. That's our indirect object. We use that little word to kind of help us to Bill. So here it is to God. So when you are reading in your interlinear and you see a dative, try to or for and see if it works. All right, give glory to God. That's the indirect object. Accusative. Theon, and I forgot to highlight it here. Theon udis eoraken popote. So this is God no one has seen ever, at any time. So this is accusative, theon. Udis is actually nominative, so that's your subject. No one has seen God. So here's your verb, has seen. God is your accusative. So you don't have to put a little helping word like the genitive or dative because it's the direct object. God is the object of the seeing. So no one has seen God at any time. No one has ever seen God. He is the object here. So if you see an accusative, think there's probably a verb that this noun is connected to, and it is the object of that verb. All right? And the cases do have various other functions, but I want you to just think about these for now. Nominative is, genitive is, and what helping word are we going to use in English? Of. Dative is, indirect object. What helping word are we going to use in English? To or for. And accusative is direct object. Very good. So here, let's kind of summarize some of the things we've talked about over the last couple of class periods. You're going to have to pick an interlinear Greek New Testament that you like the best. So if you want something in your hands, go buy one. If you're okay with using your phone or your computer or a tablet, use either Blue Letter Bible or Bible Hub. And what I will probably do here in a second is raise your hand if you kind of like the way that one looked. Let's see if I can go back. Might have to drag that over. Oh, it's in a different tab. So if you like that, there's that option. If you, nope, wrong one. Interlinear. So this is the way this one looks. So you got that or that. I think this one looks a little nicer to me. But if you like kind of seeing it all together, you can use that as well. Which does anyone prefer Bible Hub? Are you okay with that one? Then I'm gonna. You like that one? No, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to show both here. I'll show both. So first, starting out with the Blue Letter Bible, let's go back here and let me show you how to access this. And if you want to pull out any kind of electronic device, you can do that. If you want to, there is an app that you can download for either of those, Bible Hub or Blue Letter Bible. But I'm not as familiar with this one, but let me go ahead and on the home page here, you would go to this. Then Brad was kind enough to show me that you can hover over Tools, click Interlinear. Now, what it'll give you here is the English order for God so loved the world. I don't particularly like that. I would rather have this forward inline, which will then allow you to see the Greek order and the English translation underneath. Now, something to note here. What happened?
By the way, if you don't have to hover over tools and hit interlinear, you can just hit tools and pull up interlinear.
All right, cool. Thank you. Forward in line. Now, let me show you something here if you're going to use the Blue Letter Bible. Does anyone know what TR stands for? Textus Receptus. If you use a New King James Version or a King James Version, you're going to like that one because that's the Greek text that lies underneath it, or lays underneath. So I think you can, I want to.
How do you get that pulled up on Blue Letter?
So is that the app or the website? Okay. So you will click, it'll take you to the home page. I would click the magnifying glass at the top and hit John 3:16. Oh, you don't have that at the top? All right. Were you able to pull up John 3:16? So touch the 16, and then you should be able to click interlinear concordance, and then that would give you the option for that forward inline. Now, there should be an option to change it if you don't want to use TR. I know I found it the other day. Not that it's a big deal, but if you use something like New American Standard or ESV, it may not always match up.
What is the other, if you don't want to use TR, MGNT?
Yes.
On the app, the MGNT is at the bottom.
Okay.
I don't know if there's a way of telling it, hey, I'd rather see the MGNT.
Right. Okay.
Well, that might change the
Okay. So does it have a Greek text underneath it or in it? Okay. So I would imagine. So what I have in my normal list is, I guess I haven't tried it on the interlinear. What I have is actually two columns, one with an English text and one with the other one besides TR. But we can work that out individually if we need to. TR will be fine for now, as you're just beginning to learn this. But that's how that looks. If you want to set up with Bible Hub, let me go back and just show you how you would get to this. I'll go slowly. So if you open the Bible Hub app, or if you open the website, if you want a verse in particular, I would just type in John 3:16 on the search bar. That will bring up actually a lot of all the translations they have in English, or all the major ones, and you can compare. It gives you short thing on context, cross references. So that's all helpful just for Bible study. But then you, instead of clicking Greek, I would click up here on interlin, and that I think it's INT on the app because it's a little smaller, and you can click interlin, and then it'll bring up that exact information you want. So, any questions about that so far? Yes,
Yeah, go back to the blue letter for a second.
sure.
Okay, now look at the left column. The left column of the Greek interlinear, all the way to the left. Yeah, all right, you got it. So, and then utos, hotos, and then you got utos, hotos. What are all of those things?
Gotcha. So what they're doing here is they're first giving you the English gloss, so. Then they're giving you what it actually says in the verse, utos. Here they're giving you a transliteration into English. Then they're giving you the Strong's number. Then they're giving you the lexical form, the dictionary form. Because notice over here, igapisen means he loved. They're giving you the base form agapao. So that you know, they're giving you that information that we were saying you have to click on a dictionary to find it. They're giving you that information right there. So in this case, utos is the lexical form because adverbs normally don't change form. It's just there are some Greek New Testament writers who don't put the S on the end, but it's still basically the same form. That's why they have parentheses S. And then they give you a transliteration of the lexical form underneath. For instance, this is igapisen and then agapao. I'll spell that for you. And then they give you what part of speech it is. So this is an adverb in this case. All right. Any other questions about that?
When you're in that, can you go to another verse without having to go back to all this? Like, I can't scroll to the next verse.
Gotcha. So you should be, try this. Let's try this. Let's try the entire chapter. And let's see, does Blue Letter Bible let you do that?
There's the little arrows there, I think at the top. You
Ah.
can like a verse or a whole chapter maybe.
Gotcha.
Well, there's also, are you wanting to go to like a paragraph form?
Yes.
So
And enter.
format by up underneath the big KJV.
Yes.
Yeah, and it
By
may or may
par-
not allow you to go back and forth. You may have to go to a different Bible in order to do
All
that.
right.
The KJV may not allow you to do that.
Gotcha.
Mine just gives me one verse at a time.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think in the interlinear, it's only going to let you have a verse at a time because it's displaying so much information.
Yes.
There's a point for the other one then.
Now, that is a point for the other one because you can,
Scroll very easily to the next verse.
so you can do this in Bible Hub. Whoops. And this will give you the whole chapter in interlinear.
Or you can just use the arrows at the top to go to the next verse.
Yeah, and I think you should be able to do that here. Let me check. Forward inline. Now I think we can click. No, not
That'll be
this
next,
one.
That's next chapter. Yeah. So I don't know about the down arrow,
Let's see.
but I mean you can scroll to the next verse and then pull up the tools, but
Gotcha.
It doesn't display tools for more than one verse at a time.
Gotcha. All right, so pros and cons. You can decide which one you like. Does anybody, while we're here, need anything else, any questions about these formats as you're going to start clicking through them on your own? All right.
If we can turn on and off, which some of the apps allow, I've got 3 different ones I've been trying out. If we can turn on and off certain things, is it helpful to take out some information? So what should we take out so that we can get to the heart of what we're looking at versus the extras?
So, I mean, technically, for our purposes,
You need both forms?
well, technically you don't need the lexical form.
That's the one you need.
I think you could still click here on the word and, well, this gives you specifically for this form of the word, it looks like, the imperfect form. Yep. So, oh man, it's hard to, my edges are gone. Oh, it's tabbed anyway. I keep
Edge is gone because you're using Chrome.
forgetting that. Yeah. Bryce would just like me to go to Linux anyway. All right, so let's go to, let's see. I want to see what would happen. Yeah, it'll just take you to it in your chosen translation. So if, for instance, we click NASB, and then,
Actually, go up and hit the big KJV.
oh, sorry. Oh, there it changed. Click to change. Oh, so yeah, if you click it up here.
So now you've got the two options in format by. You can do verse by verse. You can do paragraph.
Gotcha. So if I click, oops.
Until you pull up the tools.
Yeah. Yep. There we go. All right. So any questions about these layouts? Does everyone kind of see how you would get to an interlinear to look up a verse?
So you have to change the translation, change the underlying Greek text, basically.
Yeah, it kind of looks that way.
Not
Now, technically, I wonder if we can just go straight to this. Yeah, so it still isn't going to give us a paragraph form when we have the tools up, but you do have the entire Greek text of the MGNT, which has changed it here. All right, so coming back here, I would suggest you just play around with it. Just pick some of your favorite verses and start clicking through and trying to identify some of the nouns. Don't worry about verbs, adverbs, all that other stuff right now. Just start looking at some nouns and then start clicking on those Strong's numbers, looking through some of the lexica, kind of see how these things fit together. So then as you figure out some of those parsing codes and some of the how the actual device is going to work, how the app is going to work, then we'll start seeing how these nominative, genitive, dative, accusatives fit into sentences, and then we take that and we have to rework it into English order. So that's kind of the overarching process as you work your way through. So let's do that with John 14 since we have a few minutes. Look up here and tell me what our first noun is. Word. And it says in NMS. Can anyone tell me what that means? Nominative masculine singular, and we already identified it as a noun. And the word logos means word, and that's why they have that little gloss there. Now, the interlinear, here's something to keep in mind. This is a translator's translation. Now, it's very wooden, it's in Greek word order, but it is the translator's translation. So there'll be sometimes when you come to this word logos in an interlinear, and it won't say word underneath, because it might mean account in that other passage. So that's when those little numbers are helpful so that you can get an idea. For instance, Hebrews 4 and verse 12. Remember the end of that in English? To whom we must give an account, or to whom we must, there's another translation there, but to whom we must give an account. That's the word there. So it's kind of interesting that he says the word is active, and then we have to give a word back. But you kind of miss that in a translation, because the idiom is to give a word is to give an account to the one who is judging us. All right, so just be aware that that translation will not always be consistent, that if you see this Greek word, it may be translated differently. Here's where you get to do the fun job of deciding, is this a good translation or not? Or would it be better to go to one of those different meanings of the word logos? Here, word is a good translation. What's our next noun in this sentence? Flesh. Very good. We see in NFS. What does that mean? All right. So we'll work through. Want to just say it out loud, and if you're going to be wrong loud. That's what R.J. Stevens used to say. So what does the first N mean? Noun. What does the next N mean? What's the F mean? And the S? Singular. So this word flesh, notice this has nothing to do with sexual gender. This just has to do with grammatical gender. Sarx happens to be a feminine word. And notice here that the word became flesh. Now, we might, maybe your mind didn't get triggered, But notice that we have the subject in the nominative, we have a verb, became, and then we have another nominative here. This is one of those interesting cases that we aren't going to worry about too much right now, but it's the same in English, even if we don't always do it correctly in English. I am he. Not I am him, which is your accusative form. I am he, it is your nominative form. If you have a verb that is an equal, then you're going to have a nominative on the other side as well, is basically the idea. All right, so we will come back to this and then work our way into maybe verbs and kind of see. So what I suggest for homework is just start using your interlinear. And I never want to distract you from worship, from study, but if you happen to have your Bible app open and the preacher or teacher is going to a familiar Bible verse, use that interlinear and just kind of use that translation as quickly as you can and see how it works out. All right, appreciate everyone's participation.